Imagine a world where dreams are crushed, hope is stolen, and human life is treated like a commodity. A world that thrives in the shadows, hidden in plain sight, and built on the exploitation of the vulnerable. This world exists today, and it's a $150 billion industry. Human trafficking. Over 40 million lives are entangled in this dark web, a figure that is hard to grasp but impossible to ignore. From the back lanes of rural towns to the center of busy cities, this hidden world thrives in the very places you wouldn't expect, operating in secret across nations, continents, and civilizations. Human trafficking is far-reaching, yet despite the magnitude of this global problem, it persists in silence. How did such a monstrous business grow to this size? And why, despite global efforts, has it been so hard to stop? Although it's a worldwide epidemic affecting almost every country, human trafficking operates in the shadows under the complex network of criminal organizations, dishonest officials, and worldwide demand. With the industry generating $150 billion per year, the estimated 49.6 million slaves today are startling numbers. But the scope is equally terrible, not only in terms of the absolute count of victims. Almost every area of the globe suffers from human trafficking, from the sex trade in Southeast Asia to forced labor in North America and Europe. No region is immune. For traffickers who take advantage of political unrest and poverty, nations including Thailand, Nigeria, India, and Mexico both act as source and transit countries. Richer countries like Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States are the final destinations. Corruption, poverty, and weak law enforcement allow traffickers to operate with near impunity. Through established networks, sometimes overlooked by authorities, victims are moved across borders. This is a continuous global crisis, as traffickers find fresh means to evade detection, even while law enforcement agencies have made progress in stopping it. As we zoom in on the scale of this empire, let's uncover the faces behind the numbers, the victims who suffer in silence. Benevolent numbers hide real people with stories of unspeakable suffering. Every victim of trafficking was either outright kidnapped, tricked, or coerced. Once full of possibility and hope, their lives have been supplanted with trauma, anxiety, and hopelessness. Think of Maria, a Romanian woman sold by her ex-boyfriend for 1,500 euros, held captive, raped, sold several times, and then rescued by police on her way to Italy. She now works to inform others about human trafficking after undergoing psychological counseling and help from a Romanian NGO. Cases of child labor in the cocoa sector of West Africa are also rather well recorded. 2 Malian boys trafficked to work on cocoa farms in Côte d'Ivoire later sued multinational corporations for not stopping their exploitation. These tales are not anomalies. Millions of people all around have experiences they reflect here. Human trafficking victims go through physical and psychological trauma that stays with them forever. Even those who manage to flee have great difficulty reconstructing their lives. Their trauma does not vanish. Rather, it lingers long after they have been saved. Many survivors battle to restore a sense of normalcy, since rehabilitation is a long and difficult process. But how is it that such a heart-wrenching practice remains so profitable? Let's dive into the business model that fuels this nightmare. Human trafficking operates like any other business, with the goal of maximizing profits through exploitation. Traffickers recruit, transport, and sell their victims, creating a vast, dark marketplace where human lives are the currency. Victims are promised jobs, education, or a better life, only to find themselves trapped in brutal conditions. The victims are sold into forced labor, sexual exploitation, or worse, organ harvesting. They work in factories, on farms, in construction sites, or as domestic workers, hidden in plain sight. The traffickers, meanwhile, face low risks and reap high rewards. In many countries, the penalties are minimal, making this a lucrative business model. The traffickers may run the business, but it's the demand from buyers that keeps it alive. Human trafficking persists because there is demand. Consumers unknowingly participate by purchasing cheap goods, from fast fashion to electronics, produced by trafficked labor. But in the sex trade, the buyers are fully aware of their actions. In cities around the world, trafficked women and children are forced into prostitution to meet this demand. Thanks in great part to the anonymity given by the dark web, buyers can access trafficked people quite easily, which makes this demand even more alarming. Using online channels to promote their victims, traffickers help buyers participate in this horrible business without running any risk. Even as law enforcement works to bring traffickers to justice, corruption and new tactics make the fight harder. Law enforcement agencies are fighting a difficult battle. Despite global efforts, traffickers remain ahead of the curve, adapting new technologies and exploiting legal loopholes. Corruption is a major obstacle. Traffickers bribe officials to ignore their activities, making it nearly impossible to bring them to justice. There have been successes. Raids by Interpol, the FBI, and local authorities have rescued thousands of victims. But for every trafficker arrested, many more continue their operations undetected. The lack of global cooperation and consistent enforcement allows traffickers to slip through the cracks, keeping this dark trade alive. But despite the challenges, there is hope. The fight isn't over, and the future could hold a turning point. Despite the grim reality, there is hope. International laws, like the UN Protocol, have created frameworks for countries to fight trafficking. Governments are imposing stricter penalties, and law enforcement agencies are using cutting-edge technology to track traffickers across borders. Public awareness is also growing. Documentaries, survivor testimonials, and social media campaigns are shining a light on the issue. But the fight is far from over. Traffickers are relentless, and the demand remains strong. Ending this nightmare requires the combined efforts of governments, NGOs, and individuals like you. The question remains, can we truly stop human trafficking? Human trafficking is one of the darkest industries of our time, fueled by greed and exploitation. But here's the truth. While traffickers profit in the shadows, we have the power to bring this issue into the light, and together we can end it. This isn't a fight for governments and law enforcement alone. It's a fight for all of us. Your actions matter. Support organizations fighting trafficking. Share this video to raise awareness and demand that governments and corporations take real steps toward ending this crisis. What will you do? How will you help shape a world where no one is bought, sold, or exploited? Now is the time to act. Be the voice for the voiceless, and let's ensure that this global nightmare becomes nothing more than a dark chapter in our history books.